Hey y'all, welcome back. Today I'm going to be taking y'all along with us for just a typical homeschool day in the life as we go throughout our homeschool lessons. So it is 11 o'clock, which is our typical start time for our school day. We have a little bit later of a start time than some people probably do, simply because it can be consistent for us. So we have to be out of the house a couple times during the week for therapy sessions early in the morning. And so 11 o'clock is just the time that we can start consistently each and every day. We've been up for a lot longer than that. I've been able to get some of our cleaning done. We cleaned bedrooms, washed bedding, done some things in the kitchen this morning. So we've been up way earlier than 11 o'clock, but we waited to start our school lessons. My older two have already done their math lessons. I said my older two. They're the only two that I'll homeschool. My other son is only 2. So the boys have already done their math review part of their math lesson. I'll sit down and teach them the new concept here in a little while. But we're just gonna kind of go through what a typical day of school lessons look like, starting at 11 o'clock. I'm gonna turn the camera around and we're gonna get started. Since the house has a tendency to get very loud with all 3 kids inside, I'm going to be switching back and forth between voiceover and just sharing little clips of how things are going. But the first thing that I do before we start our school lessons is gather up all of the lesson books and teacher's guides that both of my boys need for their independent subjects. So we start the morning out with those subjects, things like math, language arts, handwriting, phonics lessons for my middle son, and I go ahead and get all of those books pulled out. Now, my oldest son is using Christian Light Education this year for his language arts, and if you have ever looked at CLE, you know that they have a lot of review included with every lesson. So I usually go through before I pass the book off to him, because he completes it on his own, and cross out some of the things for that day. This particular day, there was only one area that I crossed out. All of the other review areas were things that I did want him to review. He had just done his quiz for the week, and he had a couple areas that it was obvious that he needed to continue to review those concepts on. So he had a lot of review to do that day. Some days it seems like I cross out about half of it. All right, here's yours. Okay, we're going to start with your warm-up. While he is working on his language arts, that gives me time to work with my middle son, which is my youngest homeschooler, on his independent lessons. So he is a very math-minded kid, so we like to start out with math. It's his favorite subject. You're going to be green, I'm going to be blue. Now, we are going to multiply. You're going to flip a card over, and you're going to times it by 3, okay? And you're going to find the answer, and you're going to put your counter on top of the answer. Whoever gets all of their numbers filled up first wins, okay? Okay. We are using Math with Confidence, which most lessons has some type of activity or game that you can play. We don't always play the game. It just depends on how the day is going, if the house is calm enough for it, or if my 2-year-old is right in the middle of us. But if we have the time for it, then we will go ahead and play it. What you just saw me doing there was going back over the work he had done that morning and realizing that he had skipped a whole section of his review work. So I went ahead and had him go back and review those problems again. And then we just go ahead and go through all of his independent lessons during this time. So we done math, and now we're going to move into his phonics lessons. We've been using the booster cards from The Good and the Beautiful. He is doing really well with sounding out words. If you've not watched any of my previous videos before, he has a significant speech disorder. It is like a motor planning disorder. So it can make it difficult for him to sound out different words because he cannot physically make all of the different sounds, especially when it comes to things like combining consonant sounds together. So we just kind of have been doing what works. We've used the McGuffey readers for a while because he really does well with sight words, but I do like the Good and the Beautiful's booster cards. And over the winter break, I actually went ahead and downloaded the workbook to go along with it. It's free, so I thought, you know what? I'm just going to download it and print it, and we can add that into our rotation of phonics instruction. He's doing really well with it. We're just working on building fluency. I'm going to check your stuff real quick, and then we can go through your math lesson. Kason, Mama wants you to come work on. After phonics, all he had left to do for his independent lessons was some handwriting. So we've been using the Handwriting Without Tears workbook for him. So I just get that set up for him and he can sit next to me. And I went ahead and started to check my oldest son's work. That way he can go ahead and make corrections as needed or go back to the areas that maybe he needed a little bit of help with, and he can go get that finished up before it's time for us to sit down together and work on his new math lesson for that day. Now, during all of this time, my 2-year-old had been occupied playing with some Play-Doh, but he was over it at this point. It had been about 45 minutes. We don't get the Play-Doh out too often because it makes a huge mess, but it's worth it sometimes to get it out and keep their little hands busy and have him strapped into his high chair in one spot. So that's what he had been doing. Okay, we are pretty much finished with independent lessons, so like math, language arts type things. I do still have to teach my oldest son his new math lesson for today, so that takes us about 15 minutes. I'm going to clean up the table in here, teach him his new lesson, and then we are going to have some lunch and take a break, and then we will do our family subjects. I have the TV on for the 2-year-old right now. He's Play-Doh'd out, but I still need him to be occupied for just a few minutes longer, so he's going to get a cartoon break, and then, like I said, we'll do some lunch and family style lessons. As you can see, the 2-year-old had zero interest in the cartoons. So he decided that he was going to come help clean up from our school lessons. He is in the worst climbing stage right now. 90% of the time, I have all of our chairs put up because he will push chairs all over the house and just climb anything and everything that he can get to. So most of the time our chairs are even flipped over on our table like I'm about to mop or something, just trying to keep him from climbing on things. If you have any suggestions on how to make that stop, please leave them down below in the comments. It's kind of making me lose my mind having to get our chairs down every time we need to eat a meal or do school. But like I mentioned, we are going to do my oldest son's math lesson. We have been splitting our math up into 2 different parts. So in the morning, my boys do their review from the previous day's lesson and the mixed review that comes with each lesson. So that's what they do first thing in the morning before school gets started. They are required to get their math review of the previous day's concept and the mixed review page done. Then later on in the morning, when we sit down to do our independent lessons, I will teach them a new concept. We will practice it a little bit together, maybe play the game, and then the next morning they will get up and do the review of that concept and the mixed review. Okay, we have finished up our lessons that we needed to get to before lunchtime. I have a homemade pizza crust back here that I had in the freezer. I like to make them in bulk and then put them in the freezer. So I'm going to assemble a pizza real quick and pop it in the oven. We're gonna have lunch, take a little bit of a break. Kids are playing outside, and then we will jump back into our school day. Since I mentioned that I make these pizza crusts in bulk and put them in the freezer, I want to do a video here soon just talking about how I structure our homeschool schedule in terms of like weeks. So I've talked a little bit about our daily schedule and how we move from subject to subject, but I also follow a 6-week on, 1 week off school schedule, and during that 1 week off is where I do a lot of resetting of different household systems and routines. So things like stocking my freezer, doing some cleaning, things like that that may kind of get pushed to the side during the weeks that we're doing school, just because those days are busy and already so full. So I want to do a video talking about that. Just some simple things that I have found to really help the home run more smoothly that you can do during a 1 week break. So while the pizza was in the oven, I went ahead and cleaned up the rest of our lesson books, put all the chairs up. Like I said, we have a climber right now. And then I was able to pull out the books that we needed for our family subjects. So things like history, science, any biographies that we're reading through, poetry, our Bible reading. All of that we do together as a family. We have a devotional, but we do that outside of school time. And I also went ahead and pulled out my oldest son's books for Greek mythology. We're doing a study on Greek mythology this second half of the year. So I got all of those books pulled out that we needed to complete our day. And since the weather was absolutely wonderful outside this day, we went ahead and grabbed our lunch and went and sat outside to eat. We don't always do that. A lot of times I'll just let the kids have their lunch, and then we will do our readings after lunch is done with. But since the weather was so nice and we were expecting cold weather for us here in the South at least, we decided to take our books outside, and I told them that I would go ahead and do their read alouds while they were having lunch this day. The day was also taken a little bit longer than usual, I think just because I had decided to video, so I was kind of moving my camera around, which is why I don't do too many day in the life type videos, because even though it doesn't look like much, it does take time to move the camera around. So we sat down, had lunch outside. I put on some of our books on audiobook. We actually listened to our Bible reading. I utilized the audio recording of the Bible so that we could listen to it as we ate our lunch. And then the baby was able to kind of run around, get some of his energy out. And then I was able to also put our history book on audio, and we listened to that together and then had our discussions. Now, at this point, the little one was needing a nap, so he came inside so that I could put him down for a nap, and we decided to go ahead and do our Greek mythology lesson. We still had another family book to read, but since the little one was fussing a lot, we sat that one aside until he went down for his nap, came back inside for a few minutes to do Greek mythology. I did purchase the guides from Memoria Press for Greek mythology because I have absolutely no knowledge of Greek mythology, and I did not have time to pre-read this book, so I decided to buy the guide because I just knew I was going to need some help. We don't do everything in the workbook, but after my son orally answers all of the questions, I do go back and pick 1 or 2 of the questions and write the answer out on the board so that he can copy it down into his workbook, and we actually just use that as his copy work for the day. Now, after this, all we had left to do was to read our nature lore book. The boys asked if we could take that back outside, so we did that. We went, sat out by our ponds, read from our nature lore book, and it was a wonderful way to end this homeschool day. We're not always able to get outside this much during our school lessons, but on the days that we can, we absolutely love to. But that's it. This is how the day ended. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video.
What if one goes in and one goes out?
Okay, I don't